It started because I worked for 20 years with the Diplomatic World Bulletin at the UN. And we covered every reception. We did interviews with the different ambassadors. It was Richard Holman and myself. And I also worked with him with the Wall Street transcript. And unfortunately, Richard Holman died about 8 years ago now. And I was lost. I was so used to working with the Diplomatic World Bulletin. I had my credentials early in the game from WOR, and I worked with NBC at the UN, and I liked working with the different diplomats and being able to talk to them. What are the aims of your country? Because each diplomat, it was very interesting, as one ambassador would leave, and they'd stayed anywhere from 2 to 4 years, the next ambassador had different interests, always of value to the country, of course, but they had their own creative initiatives. And I found that at the United Nations, you had many ministers of finance coming. And the Minister of Finance was very involved in economic development. Some of the ambassadors were also involved in economic development, but others were much more interested in the inter-country relationships, the power of their country in the UN, working with the non-governmental organizations to the UN, and they didn't have a lot of time. But working with Richard Holman with the Wall Street transcript, we began working with the ministers of finance and the Wall Street CEOs and heads of major corporations. But not only Wall Street, we interviewed sometimes late at night, calling into Asia, into Japan, and I began to be listening to Mr. Holman interviewing, more knowledgeable. He was much more talented and much more knowledgeable to finance than I was, but I began to see where it jibed for the country to have financial development and in that arena. That was long before the IT informational type of meetings became important. So then, after Richard Holman died, I offered the family, I had a group of investors, to buy his Diplomatic World Bulletin. But the family wanted so much money, they wanted a couple of $1 million, and frankly, I was the one with Richard Holman who built the publication. And my investors were willing to invest $1 million, but they also said, Gloria, it's you, go do your own thing. So about 2 years later, which is about 7 years ago, in around that area, I began thinking where to go, what can I do, can I get advertising? And my first publication came out, because I love France, with the President of France. And I decided I didn't want to have a publication that was not officially accepted by the country. So I negotiated with the Quai d'Orsay in France to allow me to put the French President Sarkozy on the cover. And Sarkozy was very, very different, very creative, and he liked the idea, he was fine. So my first one was the President of France. Then, because of my interest in Saudi Arabia, I then worked with the embassy in Washington and here in the UN to get permission to do a magazine with the King of Saudi Arabia, Abdullah, on the cover. Once again, they were very nice, very welcoming. I believe my experience with the UN and the fact that they knew my history with the Diplomatic World Bulletin and the Wall Street transcript, there was a certain amount of knowledge about me, my aims, and where I was going with the publication. My next one was Saudi Arabia, and what interested me was, through the ambassador in Washington, who's now the foreign minister, I asked them to send me some of the photos for the publication. I was amazed. They sent me a photo of the king with two well-known American rabbis. Now, that photo spoke for itself in my magazine. And I found, because I take a lot of the photos in the magazine myself, that on the same page, I put the observer ambassador of Palestine on that page, because I wanted to show the Saudis are open to all sides of the coin or story. So that was very well accepted. It did well. We had to do a reprint, and even it sold out. Then my next publication, because I'm a woman, was I admired the Queen of England. And once again, I negotiated with Buckingham Palace. What I found, which you may find interesting, is it's not through the UN ambassador or the Washington ambassador. You have to deal directly with the court in these publications. And so I was always dealing with the court. In the case of France, with the Quai d'Orsay. In the case of Saudi Arabia, permission had to go to his court, and it was accepted, which made me very proud. Then my next publication was the King and Queen of Belgium, and I'll tell you my thoughts in all of this. I like ruling families. I find there's continuity in the royal families. I find where there's dissension in a country, the Queen of England is able to negotiate a lot of this dissension. In Belgium, you have two separate political groups. You have the Walloons, and I forget the name of the other group, the Dutch group, speaking different languages. But the king is loved, and the queen is loved. And so, as I said, I saw the same thing in England. Whatever the political parties, the court and the queen and the royal family keep the family together. It's like a cult or a form of religion, maybe, but they're loved. Even when I was in England during the Queen's silver anniversary, you could buy socks with her face on it. You could buy mugs with her face on it. You could buy all sorts of things that you wear for this silver anniversary. And the people were running around with all of these unusual mementos. It shows their affection and their love. It's almost like during the American political elections, everybody's walking around with a pin who they're voting for. But in those countries, everybody agrees. So, and then I began to think about it, and I realized we have our royal families here. We had two Adamses, we had two Roosevelts, we had lots of Kennedys, still politically powerful, tons of Bushes, one running now. We had the Clintons, the husband, and now the wife from that ruling party is trying to run the country, and maybe even they're arranging for their daughter to be next on the ladder. There's just no doubt about it. You can see she's being trained. She's beginning to campaign for her parents. So I believe ruling families are very, very important. So I believe in Saudi Arabia's royal family. I believe in all the Gulf country royal families. I think they're very important for stability. And I, as a matter of fact, when I think about it in the current election, I'm one of the people that tends to say, I think I'd rather have another Bush, even though I hate the fact that the Bushes were the motivation to enter into Iraq. It was a huge mistake, but I believe the Clintons have made other equally big mistakes. So I think American foreign policy needs more muscle and more knowledge and more study, but that's my own opinion, and everything is. So that's where I started my magazine. Now, my magazine, which is called Society and Diplomatic Review, I put in my own publisher's statement, but if I can open it, I have the face of every UN ambassador in it. It's like a menu. Who do you want to meet? And there it is in the book, and if you can't find them online, and if I feel this is of value to any country, I sometimes am motivated to see one of the ambassadors and say, "Sir, would you receive this important charity or foundation who are helping the whole world?" Or even a top CEO of a major international company that can help sustainable development, would they receive them? Sometimes, I'm told, go to my consul general. So I also put in my magazine, the Society of Foreign Consuls. And so I have every consul general in my magazine. And if somebody is interested to work with economic development, and if they can't get to the consul general, because some of them have I forget what you call it, gatekeepers, you can't get to them, I'll sneak past the gatekeeper if I feel it helps the country. So that's my magazine. Then also I found in the UN that the ambassadors' wives are very important to them. And the wives very often work side by side with their husbands, especially now also you have all sorts of foundations and all sorts of other organizations in the UN where the wife can help her husband by being knowledgeable to some of these organizations, finding out how real are they important or not for the country to be knowledgeable to. So the wives are very important. So I began to put in the wives of the different ambassadors. So I have a couples area also. Then, as the magazine grew, and I saw the need of, as I said, when the Saudis sent me the photos, which interested me, I was amazed. The Saudi king is sending me, through his cohorts or his organization, a photo of himself with two Jewish rabbis. And I found after that the king was meeting, when he was here in New York, under hospital care, he was still meeting different rabbis from the United States. I got very interested in showing, through my photos, different ambassadors discussing with other ambassadors at the different UN functions where the picture speaks louder than words. I didn't have to say anything. Look who's meeting with the Syrian ambassador. Look who's attending the Iran reception. By just putting in photos, it indicates the outreach quietly, even under the radar, of different countries, because it's the job of the UN ambassador to be knowledgeable to all of the 190-some countries in the UN. And they're thinking the receptions are not just parties. They are educational for these diplomats. So that is in my magazine. Then I put in photos like need to know and power people. And that part of the magazine is, I put in, for instance, General Petraeus's photo. Now, General Petraeus was under investigation in the United States, but in my opinion, he's the greatest general of the United States and the whole world. I put his photo in, and I know if it would help his country, he would be delighted to meet another important person who could be informational to him with his clout. And also you have people like Ted Turner gave $3 billion to the United Nations. Now that money is still going strong. It's been invested and it has income and it's still important to the building. And I would like to say that I was on the board of directors of UNICEF, the Manhattan chapter. I founded it with a very important attorney who unfortunately is no longer around, Max Rabb. And we started the Manhattan chapter of UNICEF because that's where Wall Street is. Then I got the idea while I was in Saudi Arabia because I was staying at the home of Prince Mohammed bin Saud bin Abdulaziz from the royal family, to ask him and his son, Prince Michel bin Mohammed bin Saud bin Abdulaziz, how about your sending a goodwill ambassador to my Manhattan chapter of UNICEF? Well, in the end, it ended up, they selected Prince Talal, and he did become the envoy to UNICEF, and they bypassed my little Manhattan chapter, but I'm very happy for UNICEF, but I'd like to get my credit. It was my creativity in Saudi Arabia, received by King Khalid, that there is now a Saudi goodwill ambassador to UNICEF, and as of now, Saudi Arabia has given, not Ted Turner this time, Saudi Arabia has given $3 billion to UNICEF. I'd like to take a little of that credit there. Long forgotten because it's a long time ago.